well, I'm Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, January 14th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We break the rules for Native radio. We don't do prayers and we don't do buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we may step on a few toes along the way, but our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is heaped upon us, and we do it all right here from the Cavaliers territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams live on our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. Video streams live on Facebook, on our Facebook group pages via Facebook Live. We take the audio and we put it up on SoundCloud, which puts it out as a podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms. Follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, and of course subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV. All right. I'm sorry for the technical difficulty. We're switching some things around here in the studio, and we're obviously playing around with some microphones. Look, I'm the host of the show, and I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud, who's managing our audio and our video, helping me get this mic situation straightened out. So let me get right into it. Look, my last show, I talked about what's ours and what's not ours. And it kind of led me to a conversation, or to a thought process, and to a conversation, making me think about things like, how did we take a step backwards? And let me explain. Look, the topic of tonight's show is primitive culture, and I'm not talking about ours. At least I'm not talking about our original culture. But we go from a place where we acknowledge the power of creation and our relationship to all of creation. We talk about it. We weave it into our opening, to our Hunda Gurdiwa Dekwa. We weave it into so much of our conversation about our relationships with all of creation. We make a point not to create a hierarchy or to place ourselves above the rest of creation, or any of us individually above each other. That's what our culture was about. We take a look forward 7 generations, meaning to those faces, to our relatives that we will never see. We take that and we put that in our minds as we are making our decisions about the things that we do in our life, the decisions we make that for our people, but for all of creation. We have a view about governance that says we need to bring our minds together. We need to reach a consensus when making important decisions. That's what our culture was. And I'm not exaggerating this. I mean, we go from a place where when we're experiencing war and conflict to coming up with a solution. We come up with a solution for peace, a process to resolve conflict. We don't stick with a might makes right mentality. We advance ourselves to a place so that we are more civilized. And I'm using that term almost facetiously. And what do we turn to? What do we have inundated upon us? Religion. Monarchies, hierarchy, who's better than the other. This whole idea of racism, that's what we become exposed to. So today, we've actually left much of that higher understanding behind. I mean, it almost pains me to say, but we've abandoned some of that. And many of our people, now I'm not saying all of them, but many of people have adopted this, a belief that there's a holy man, a white man in the sky. And how do I know he's white? Because I saw Leonardo da Vinci painted him on the top of a chapel. So I know he's a white man because I saw the picture. So there's a white man in the sky who's all-knowing, all-seeing, all-hearing, hears everybody's prayers, and he created man in his image
to rule the world. Did these incredible things that are totally unprovable, but so many of our people believe it. How do we go from a level of understanding to taking this giant leap backwards? And look, even, and I don't even want to call down that religion, Christianity, or any of the other two major religions from the, religions of Abraham, Islam or Judaism, but any of these belief systems that say we believe in the one true God and everybody else is wrong. And we're probably going to kill you for it. Because make no mistake about it, while we can listen to the news and hear about jihads and theocracies and everything else, the United States, in spite of all its separation of church and state BS, because there was no separation of church and state, our people were killed in a holy war. The doctrine of Christian discovery lays it all out. This was about the doctrine of Christian domination. And the idea of dehumanizing anybody who doesn't believe in their one God rules all, placed only their believers to rule the world. And then they preach this other stuff. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. So in other words, if your life sucks, don't worry. In the afterlife, you're gonna be served. Don't worry about lifting yourselves up, out of bondage. In fact, I mean, there are some people, especially on the evangelical right, that will have you believe that if a government exists, and this was kind of widely tossed around a while back here. If a government exists, it only exists because God allows it to exist. And so to disobey your government is to disobey God. No, these right evangelicals were saying this. Congressmen, senators were saying this crap. Who's the Jeff Sessions, the former U.S. Attorney General? He was saying this crap. So we go from a people who understand the relationship beyond all the spirituality stuff that anybody wants to spin about this. I mean, that we're spiritually connected. No, that we're physically, that there's a tangible connection between man and all of creation. And to suggest that all of creation was placed here by some higher power that placed it here only for us, what a primitive way of thinking. What an ignorant way of thinking. And that's what the Bible says. Yeah, right from the beginning. Subdue the earth and all the creatures upon it. That's what Genesis says. We didn't accept that. And then governance? So this whole idea that democracy is the most authentic and just form of government. Again, let's break that down. I've talked about that before. Democracy is, supposed to be majority rule. But in the case of the United States, it's not even majority rule. It's mob rule. It's the largest minority. And it isn't even the majority or the largest minority rule, because you can manipulate the election system so some people don't get to vote, or some people's vote is squandered, or you tilt the scales to benefit slaveholding states with the electoral college. Look, it's a sham. Democracy doesn't bring people together. It separates people. And if the state of U.S. governance today doesn't demonstrate that now, then you're just not paying attention. You're just not paying attention. Because not only do you have right and left, even within the right and within the left, you have all this factionalism and infighting. And what do? We adopt that religious mentality. We adopt that democracy model. I'm not saying we all did or we all do, but we're all impacted by it, and we all fall into it at some level. Look, I can talk about the fault of capitalism and consumerism all of that stuff. But if you follow that back, it ties to this. It ties to the religious belief, the Christian work ethic, right? The Protestant work ethic. Isn't that what they say? Work hard and you'll get rewarded. So that's what they promote, the Protestant work ethic. Because apparently nobody else works. We went from a place of enlightenment about where man fits in the universe. With no shame about what we don't know, but being pragmatic about what we do know and what we do learn. And we made sure that we learned from the birds in the air, from the animals on the land, from the plants that grew, from the fish that swam. We took cues from all of nature, and we learned about nature. Look, did we advance technology to outdo nature? No, we didn't. But you know what? The funny thing is, for all of the science and all the technology that disproves all of this religious hocus pocus, most white men and those affected by white men, including us, we're going to ignore the science. No, you don't raise from the dead. No, you can't put 2 of every animal on a boat. Some of those animals eat animals. You can't put 2 of every animal on a boat. And you can't pretend that half the Bible says God is a wrathful, angry, vengeful God who kills people, mass killings of people, with plagues, with floods. And then say, oh, the new part of the Bible, and we're going to put them together, is a loving, peaceful, gentle, but again, loving God. Which is it? Come on. And we're gonna pick and choose what pieces of that religion. And so will the other two religions of Abraham, Judaism and Islam. So I'm gonna pick all the vengeful part, all the killing part, all the eye for an eye, and all of that. Heaven and hell. That wasn't ours either. This whole idea that our entire lives are almost meaningless because there's an afterlife, that's not our culture. We don't live this life as a test for God or the God concept wasn't ours. And I talked about that last show. But again, think about, if you could look at any of these religions, because I'm sure you can look at the other religions and see how silly they are, right? You can look at, and in fact, when white men looked at our culture and they couldn't understand our belief system, and we told a story to explain it. Oh yeah, they believe. I see people. Oh yeah, the monotheistic belief system, that wasn't ours. Look, we didn't believe in multiple gods either. You know why? Because we didn't believe in gods. We had an open mind about whatever that power of creation was. But what they told us, those who came before us told us was acknowledge creation and respect it. Treat it right. All of creation. Because what you do with and to creation is what creation will do to and with you. Now, I know there's a whole bunch of New Agers and a whole lot of people are going to say, yeah, that makes sense. That's so beautiful. If it's so beautiful, then why have all these other cultures, including many of our people, why would we abandon it? Why would we abandon a higher understanding, a higher level of reasoning about our relationship with creation? Why would we abandon that? To pray to a God. To pray. And there's, again, no scientific evidence that prayer does anything. But, man, you can go through Facebook. And it doesn't matter if you go to native sites, if you go to Any sites. Oh, I'll pray for you. My loved one is sick. Pray for them. Look, I feel terrible when a friend of mine becomes ill. But I'm not going to pray. I will offer kind words and let them know that I'm thinking about them. If I can, if I'm close enough to perform a kind act, I will do that. But to suggest that, for one thing, to even suggest that I could somehow communicate to the powers of creation that have done that's provided everything, good and bad, by the way. I didn't even want to get into the good and evil thing, but things that help us and things that can harm us. And they also provided us with a brain to know the difference. Whether we do that or not is another thing. And then I'm going to ask more. I'm going to be arrogant enough to say that whatever that power of creation is, that has provided us with everything for a sustainable life. No, I'm sorry, I want more. I mean, for one thing, I don't even, the idea of throwing words up into the sky and hoping it's going to land on somebody that some sort of divine intervention is going to come in. Look, I will provide whatever positive reinforcement I can to somebody in crisis. And I think that's a good thing to do that. But I got to tell you, thoughts and prayers, offering that, and only that. I mean, how many people are praying for peace? But are you going to get out? Are you going to get off your ass and do something to fight for peace? I know that sounds funny, fighting for peace. How crazy is that? It's like killing for peace, right? We live in a world right now where there's a constant state of conflict someplace. And oftentimes, not just in global conflicts, but conflicts between right and left, between white and black, native and non-native, men and women. A constant state of conflict. That wasn't our culture. In fact, we took measures to resolve conflict. Instead, what you have, what's the solution? The American solution? Law enforcement. We're going to enforce peace. Send a 1,000,000-man army, and send at least a 250,000 out in the world. Because put a man in uniform or a woman in uniform, wrap them around with a jet or a tank, or give them some weapons, and they're going to fight for freedom. They're going to fight for peace. And then I'm supposed to think, oh, I want to thank all the troops for protecting my rights. They're not protecting rights. It's a war machine. And a whole bunch of countries have them. And they all got guns pointed at each other. And they all suck their people in to carrying those guns to point them at each other. How did we, as a species, with all of this intellect, how are we so freaking stupid? How have we taken such a step backwards? And I say this not just to Native people, because we certainly have. We were at a different place. And we got sucked into patriarchy. We got sucked into theology. We got sucked into abuse, the rape culture, greed, consumerism. Yeah, people are quick to remind Native people, Native people took slaves too. Yeah, that's true. Not in the way that white people did. And when I hear people say, slavery's been around for thousands and thousands of years, but it was never the business that the United States made it. I mean, the idea that there was a slave trade. And when I hear some white guy say, well, we took them out of Africa, they'd still be running around with bones in their noses. No. Most of the black people on this continent didn't come from Africa. They were bred in captivity like animals. Only the United States, only in this hemisphere, I mean, other countries participated in the whole chattel economy, that chattel slavery, but the United States hung on to it right to the very end, including northern states too. What kind of primitive culture is that? And we buy into it. A governing system that's about numbers and not even the majority rule, because it isn't. I mean, look, the sitting president had 3 million votes less than his opponent. Neither one of them had the majority of the electorate, or should I say, those who bothered to vote. The system sucks. And yet, Native people will enlist into that army, into that military service, to defend this kind of government, that Constitution that created this debacle. And we think that's an advanced civilization? We think that has advanced mankind? I'll tell you what's been advanced: weaponry, the weapons of mass destruction. You know what one of the first weapons of mass destruction that the United States was involved in purchasing? Gatling guns and Hotchkiss cannons for killing Native people. Among the first weapons of mass destruction that the United States purchased from another country. They were imported. Because they weren't using it to kill other white people. No, this is part of that religious war. Spreading Christendom. That's what it means. And the doctrine of Christian discovery, at the dawn of the doctrine of Christian discovery, was the new idea that you don't just explain Christianity to people to convert them. You do it with a sword. You do it with weapons. You do it with man-eating dogs. You beat people. You kill people. You wipe entire populations out that don't seem suitable for your religion. And those that you convert, it's okay if they die, because now you can claim that you've freed their soul. Junipero Serra, new saint, Catholic saint. Children died in his care, and I use the word care real liberally, at a rate, I mean, the death rate, the average life expectancy was under 5. But it didn't matter. Because when he baptized them, he could report back to the Vatican, these are the souls that I saved. I didn't save any human beings. I didn't save any lives. But I saved souls. What a primitive, backward way of thinking. You know, the sad part is there's a whole lot of Native people who could care less about any of this religious stuff. But then you find Jesus at the end, right? They do. I mean, we've seen it throughout history. I mean, even some of the famous Native people in American history, they're not famous because we put them in American history, but because they did. They resisted the imposition of religion until they didn't. And look, we can get into the whole Jesus saves thing. I don't know who he saves. Like I said, you can follow the news, watch the news. And I always go back to that one moment where two stories were competing for headlines, because, you know, headlines, if it bleeds, it leads, right? 2 headlines. 2 missing children, a little boy and a little girl. Little boy was missing from a hike in, you know, I don't know if he's a Boy Scout or Cub Scout or just with his family, but he got lost. Gone for days. And he turns up, you know, hungry and malnourished, but alive. And the parents saying, oh, we prayed every day and Jesus answered our prayers. He brought our child back to us. The little girl, people prayed for her every day too. She was murdered, raped and murdered, and left behind a dumpster. So, I mean, if you believe all this stuff, and I know, I mean, the way the way you deal with this, yeah, Jesus saved the little boy, not the little girl. And you know, and if you want to believe that somehow that little girl deserved to go to heaven, and that's why her life was lost, then why did she have to get raped? Why couldn't she just die quietly? Why would she have to die at the hands of some brutal sociopath? I mean, why? Psychopath. Why would that have to be that way? Why would we let that kind of violence? And then it splashed all over the news. Why are Catholic priests and Baptist priests and all this clergy scandal, why are they raping little boys and girls? This is part of the religion? It is part of the religion. I mean, it may not be promoted in the religion, but it's certainly covered up by them. Who's got the primitive culture? And is that the culture that we've now adopted? Because it sneaks in, like I said in the last show. It sneaks in. Oh, we started just plug the word creator in instead of using the word God. We say, oh, our loved one has gone to the sky world instead of heaven. Neither one of those things are our concepts, but we all say it. Or not, no, we don't all say it, but many of us do. They even bring that stuff into the longhouse. Our loved ones aren't returning to their mother. Oh, no, they're taking their final voyage to the sky world to be with the Creator. Look, when we say they return to our mothers, it's because they literally returned to the soil, to the earth that supports us. That's true. And it's undeniably true. Because even if we cremate our loved ones, those ashes return to our mother. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to take a break, and we'll be right back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
When will it all be? How we when we how we when it all be when will it all be? How we when we
Look, we're dealing with a few technical issues, so please pardon our blunders here. It'll be better on replay. We're gonna fix all this. Hey, look, I want to thank my sponsors, Ross and Holly John and the RJE Family of Business. They sponsor the show on a weekly basis. Eric White and ERW Enterprises. Eric does something for us every week. And the folks at GRE, they support us monthly, and it's those three sponsors that really help us do what we do here. And look, I know some of these conversations are uncomfortable. They're not uncomfortable for me to have, but I know for some of you this is kind of hard to hear because we've been indoctrinated. I mean, that's what. I mean. Genocide is not just killing people. It's making the people cease to exist. It's ending their lives, their ways of life. It's they used to call it denationalization. It's the idea of stripping away somebody's character, their national character, but their culture, stripping it away, and then implanting something else on them. That's still genocide. And and it's genocide for a number of reasons. Not only because it makes us cease to exist as the people we once were, but the way that we exist with this imposed culture, this primitive culture that has been imposed upon us, is the antithesis of pursuit of happiness. It's a life of misery. Now, I know, Bible says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Well, bullshit. We don't need to accept an imposed subjugation of our lives. No, we don't need to accept that. We don't need to be meek because we're going to go to some, paradise in heaven. So whatever our miserable lives are now are fine. Because that's what they try to do, was make our lives miserable. That's why we lead in all the categories that we don't want to lead in. Suicide, substance abuse, death by cop, missing and murdered indigenous women, teen pregnancy, depression, poverty. I mean, all of that. We don't want to live this way. And not all of us are in a place to change that. I mean, many of us try. And then what are we told? Oh, go to college, get an education, go out of college, and then come back and help your people. You mean to tell me we got to take our people away from our communities, send them out to be educated by white people, and then they're going to come back with the solutions? White people created the problems for us in the first place. If you have to send your people out to get PhDs and master's degrees, and then expect them to come back and fix the problems, they'll fix their problems. Look, I saw a post today. It says, don't send your people out to get educated unless you provide a place for them to come back to do some good. Well, that's one way of looking at it. But maybe the other way of looking at it is I look at the problems in the community, do a needs assessment. I'm not talking about, getting a grant and spending $10,000 or $20,000 or $100,000 doing it. But look at your community. Look at what the needs are. The problems should be self-evident at this point. But what are we going to do to fix them? I mean, you think they teach the solutions to these problems in college? You think a master's degree or a PhD teaches you you're going to become a doctor of philosophy and you're going to come back and you're going to solve because you think our problem is philosophical? There's something really wrong about the dominant culture that man has developed because it is not advanced. Technology is advanced. And I'm not saying all technology is bad. Obviously, technology that is associated with killing, whether it's killing man through advancement of weaponry, weapons of mass destruction, or whether it's killing the planet. And look, I don't really mean killing the planet. I mean having such impact on the planet that things die. Now, that's not the planet. The planet's going to survive. An entire continent ablaze. Australia, an entire continent ablaze. Man had something to do with that. And not just because of climate change. But what they've done I think man has impacted climate change, don't get me wrong. But there's also other things that we do by changing the environment, not just the climate, but the environment, creating the situations where these forest fires, and bushfires just consume. Fire is a part of nature. But what we're seeing what we're seeing in fires now is not natural. I mean, California, the power companies are the ones responsible for most of those fires lighting up. How the hell do you create an electric grid that causes forest fires? Your technology is advanced so far, and you can't solve that problem? Many of the diseases that we're challenged with are diseases of our own making. I don't mean in a lab. I mean, they're diseases caused by lifestyle. Many of the cancers that we're feeling, diabetes, gout, whatever. Many of these things that we experience because of the unhealthy lives that we live. The sedentary lifestyles. Again, depression isn't natural. There's a cause to it. And nature isn't what's making us depressed. I mean, maybe some of the violent storms and that kind of stuff, we are frightened by them and they cause depression, but nature by itself isn't causing these problems. We're the victims of our own doing. So, why have the conversation? Why am I spewing all this stuff out? Because that knowledge isn't gone. We didn't lose. I've said this before. We didn't lose our ways. We lost our way. We chose the path that we're on. Many of us. Or we got dragged along on it. But we still know. We still have people around, not just who know the language, but there are many people in every culture who understand that this idea that there's racial superiority, that there's genetic superiority, that there's a superior man above all else. And along with that superiority comes their belief systems. I mean, there's a direct connection between Christianity and racism. And on this continent, in this hemisphere. And you can go to other cultures where the racism, because the dominant culture has a different belief system, it's tied to, so whether it's Islam or Judaism or wherever. You find these people who share these religious doctrines elevate themselves, who believe that the religious doctrine supports this idea of a hierarchy. And of course, most of the cultures that adopt these belief systems, the first hierarchy is men over women. And of course, man over all else. So it doesn't matter if you just start wiping out species for your entertainment or for your enjoyment. Not to feed yourselves. Because after you learn how to kill to feed yourselves, then you realize, I could kill and I could sell that. There's a business here. Those little seals, man, those baby seals, their fur is nice. We can sell all that. So then we go from the idea of being a hunter-gatherer to, look at what the ag industry is. Look, every scientist over and over and over again says, look, the carbon footprint created by the meat industry is tremendous. Most of the stuff that's grown on the planet is to feed at some level, to feed animals for our consumption. Where if we just grew stuff and consumed it, it would be much smaller carbon footprint. It'd be healthier for us. But there's money to be made in every link of that chain. that food chain, right? And you wipe out the small farmers, and you turn. I mean, I was just listening to the news. They're talking about even this the trade, the tariff wars that that Trump's been, started. The tax wars with China and such, the trade wars. And then he said, "Oh, there's been all these millions and billions of dollars that we're giving to the farmers, so they aren't hurt by this." Look, most of the small farmers aren't getting enough money to make them sustainable. They're going out of business. They're falling off a cliff. But ag companies are getting some of those monies. They're the ones that are getting tens of millions of dollars a whack. This culture, and I use that word not as a compliment, but what has become the American culture. And I've heard some people say, "Oh, Americans have no culture." Well, whatever. They certainly have a system, a social system, as crazy as it is. It's primitive, folks. I mean, the fact that we will still praise war in the way that we do. Look, I mean, and I get it. Honor the troops. Like, I don't hate the people who enlist. I just wish they didn't. I wish them nothing but the best. I wish there was a different path that somebody could go to get an education than to feel like they've got to strap on a rifle, be told who the enemy is and who they may or who they will have to kill, and hope that they survive it. For what? So we can watch them be homeless, suffering from PTSD? Look, and all I'm saying, and look, this is to the native listening audience. All I'm saying is, before you buy in to some of this imposed wisdom, whether it's coming from a church or a government or an institution of higher learning, we ought to learn a little bit about who we are. I know I always come back to identity, and we always come back to identity. But at some point, we need to recapture. Look, did our ancestors have it all right? No. But it's the path that they were on. That's why we call it the Deohade. Because we recognize that we're on a path, and that creation, every element of creation is on a path. And those paths don't need to be in conflict with each other or in competition with each other. But we don't need to be killing each other or wiping out entire species. We need to teach our kids a different message. When I hear a 5-year-old come home from school and said, "Did you know that Iran," a 5-year-old, that Iran launched missiles at our Marines? Are we going to tell the rest of the story? Or are we going to keep handing our children this bullshit? Are we going to tell the truth? Yeah, I mean, I get it. Look, the world is not one homogeneous place. I mean, the planet isn't. I'm not even talking about the people. I'm talking about the planet. There are different environments, and those environments yield different amounts of food and water, enjoyment. So depending on where you live, I mean, I know it's crazy to think that if you have the misfortune of being born in an impoverished country, that's just your lot in life. Be meek. Don't worry, you're going to inherit the earth. But just because there's diversity in ecosystems, in environment, in people, doesn't mean that we have to have a world of such gross disparity where some people have to live such miserable lives, even in the wealthy countries, mind you. But the select few in every place on the planet get to live affluent lives. A select few in every part of the globe exploits their own people and then people around them for their own affluence. We measure success relative to the unsuccessful. I mean, we measure our wealth compared to those who have none. That's how we measure success in the world that we live in today. We had a different way. We did. Before the first white man came. Now, we didn't always have it right. We packed people into small places. We had cities. We did that stupid thing of packing people into a place so tightly that the environment couldn't support them. Yeah, we did that. We built big stone structures. We had advanced technologies. But we always got back to understanding the earth, to understanding our place with creation. Again, even when the five nations, by the accounts of our oral history, were treating each other terribly, we came back together and we formed a not just a peace, but a process for peace, for the pursuit of peace. In fact, one that when these white guys showed up, we're envious of. It's funny, they looked at our social structures with awe. And they said, how can ignorant savages do that and we can't? On some levels, they looked at it from an anthropology standpoint and says, this is how man exists at its most natural level. And of course, they looked at it and they said it was primitive. And then they became hell-bent on killing us, assimilating us, civilizing us, to the point where we enlist at a higher rate in the military service, higher than any other group of people. We've got the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma declaring themselves a Christian nation, ignoring what a Christian nation did to them, to their children, to their identity, to their lands. Ignoring all of that. Look, I don't hate Christians. In fact, most Christians don't even believe the crap involved in Christianity. I've heard people say, well, it's not Christianity. Christianity's not at fault. It's the people. It's Christians who are wrong, not the faith. Well, I don't know about all that, but all I know is there are an awful lot of people claiming to be close to God. Heck, they'll even lynch people and burn a cross on their lawn at the same time. They will kill in the name of their God. In fact, most people who are killing each other in the name of their God, at least from a war standpoint. I don't know what the lunatics who just decide to murder people do. I don't know. I've never heard of raping in the name of their God, but damn sure a lot of rape culture came with those Europeans. And we see it in other cultures. I mean, and of course the patriarchy involved in some of these countries, where the victim of rape it becomes raped again by their culture, by their societies. Part of the reason this clergy sex abuse stuff has gone on so long is because of the shame. Because people are violated twice. They're physically violated. And then they carry the shame of that. So the violation becomes a mental violation as well. It's an injury both to mind and body. And we still can't treat people fairly enough to say, look, you're a victim here. You don't need to be shamed. We slut shame every woman that that gains notoriety, who stands up. Every woman who stands up to patriarchy gets slut shamed. Whether it's at a Supreme Court hearing, nominee hearing, or whether it's running for office. I mean, it's incredible. And of course, the one of the terrible things is when some women think that equality means they have to act as heinously as men do. Women raping boys in school. Oh, seducing little boys in school. Women say, no, I can kill as well as a man can, so give me a rifle. Put me behind the controls of a jet or a drone. Man. Technology does not lift you out of a primitive culture. It can set you back into one. That's what the world's experiencing right now. All the science in the world, which rejects all the religious dogma, as I said, every honest scientific evaluation of prayer, of God, of religion, rejects it all. It used to be the churches controlled science. But even the most praised scientists ultimately get reined in. Galileo, they all get reined in back into, you got to behave according to the church. It's an incredible world. But it's amazing that in 2020, and I realize that the calendar means nothing. That's tied to religion too. But in the world that we live in today, whatever year you want to call it, for all of the technology, all the incredible advances in technology and research and science, we still go back to being these ignorant believers in fairy tales. And we let that guide us in a way that promotes racism, war, social unrest, economic and wealth, income disparity. Look, there's a direct connection. I mean, look at these mega churches. Look at some of these preachers with jets, private jets flying around. There's a direct connection to these religious figures and those who advance themselves in this religious dogma and wealth. I mean, look, yeah, I know Gandhi was poor. Mother Teresa didn't, apparently she was poor too. But what did they promote? Even Gandhi. I gotta tell you, we are not nearly as advanced intellectually, psychologically. I mean, some of the things that we do as human beings, it's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. And again, we had the luxury as Native people. We had the luxury of avoiding some of that for thousands of years. We lived on land. We made our mistakes. Like I said, we were violent. We did some of the same things that the folks in Europe did wrong. But we kept elevating ourselves and kept trying to reach a higher understanding about our place in the world and our place with the rest of creation. That's why the 7 generations concept is so important. The idea that we have to take responsibility, not just for our lives, but for the lives of those who follow us. In fact, we have to take responsibility for the lives that we will never even see. 7 generations? We're not going to live long enough to see that. I mean, we'll see our kids and our grandkids, our great-grandkids, maybe even our great-great-grandkids. 5 generations. I've got family photos. 5 generations. Don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of 6-generation families. And the reality is, if you live long enough to be 6 generations back from a current generation, you may have lost entire generations in between. So we had this concept that we have a responsibility to our loved ones and to the ones that we should love, even though we will never see them. That's an advanced way of looking at the world. That's a human development that separates us from the rest of creation and or distinguishes. I don't want to say separates us because it shouldn't separate us, but it distinguishes us. Because not a whole lot of other species on the planet can have a vision for the future and understand. I mean, instincts will carry most species to not do terrible things to the planet. Reason is man's fault. Again, we can use it to think about the impacts that we can have, or we can just use our intellect and our ability to reason to advance us individually at the cost of all else. That's a primitive culture. Look, I want to thank you guys for listening. And I hope we give you this some thought. Look, I want to remind people I'll be in New York on Thursday. I'd love to have some of the listeners of Let's Talk Native call into my show in New York. The show airs from 3 to 5 p.m. It's a 2-hour show. It's a talkback show. We put the phone number out there, and I'll post it up with my Facebook Live feed so you can see the number if you catch us on Facebook Live. You can listen to the show on at wbai.org. That's www.wbai.org. It streams live on the website, and we stream video of the show live here on Facebook. So look for us in New York. WBAI FM 99.5 if you're in the city, and you can check us out. We'll post up the video afterwards. But I'd love some of this listening audience to catch my show in New York and call in and give me your thoughts. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.